Hello. Just thought I'd do a random video because I haven't done one in a while, and my last videos were a little bit bleak, I think. But I'm in a good place at the moment, both figuratively and literally, because I moved away from London. I desperately needed to. It was a toxic environment for me, and I was stressed out, and it was affecting my speech, which when my speech becomes more compromised, that's when I know that I'm being too impacted by all of these environmental stressors and mental things that are causing me stress, that distress. And so I had to move, and it was imminent. So it was quite a rapid change, which I needed, desperately needed. And so I've been here for 2 weeks. I moved to the south coast. I can still get to London for when I need to because I've decided to do my PhD part time now instead of full time, which takes a lot of pressure off me because I was feeling a lot of pressure and still trying to cope with everything. And even though I'm doing the PhD part time, the funny thing is, I think I can actually be more efficient with my time so that I can get it done quicker and, yeah, just more efficiently and in a good space where I have that balance between my life and I don't have to compromise my health to get things done because I was doing that and it's not a healthy place to be in. How can I be an example for others if I'm not practicing what I preach and if I'm not doing the best for my own health? Regarding that, I am also having the second and third glial cancer screening test, the blood test that I had. So that should be on the horizon because conversations have occurred relating to that with the powers that be, the ones that can initiate this process to progress. And so, yeah, it's been this thing where I've always had to wait for gatekeepers. But if I take more initiative, which I've learned to do, I've learned the hard way, then I can get things done because no one's going to do it for you, especially with the kind of research that I want to do and the kind of work that I'm doing on myself as a human guinea pig and then translating that to other people. You often have to do things yourself and find creative ways of getting, yeah, just getting things done. And in a case of maybe procuring the equipment you need for experiments, the tests, that kind of thing, things you might not initially think about, but all of these small details make a huge difference. And it increases and decreases your cost. So you have to get special deals and make connections with small charities and people who can support the work and fund it and that kind of thing. So I need to focus on how I present this to those bodies and individuals that I mentioned indirectly. Kind of mentioned them, but yeah, yes and no. But yeah, mention just presenting a case to those people, and that's what I'm working on at the moment. So I'm okay. I'm okay to continue, but the scope of what we can look for and the number of participants is is dependent on what we can afford. And it's just me and my small team who is supporting me. And so it's keeping in mind all of these little things. And because I have little experience doing these things, I have to rely on people who have a lot more experience and have done this before, which is quite anxiety inducing at some times, but in equal measure, it's exciting because I am very optimistic that we can get a lot done. It's just up to me and applying myself in a way that I can have confidence in my ability to do what I need to do. And I'm still at best an hour and 15 minutes from London on the train. So even though I'm kind of on the coast where I am and in a very nice area, wooded area, quiet wooded area, because yeah, even though I'm in that situation, I can still get to London very easily. And I like being in this more stable, non-chaotic environment, because it's just not me living in an urban environment. I didn't grow up in that kind of environment, and it doesn't suit me well. And I've just noticed I've only been here for 2 weeks, and the change in my cognition and my clarity of thought and my general well-being, my sleep, even things like my digestion, because when you're stressed, you have that gut connection. And possibly I wasn't even metabolizing nutrients as well. So, yeah. And I'm doing a lot more exercise here. I always do a lot of exercise, but it's more, I find that I'm exercising when I'm in a more relaxed state, just generally, which is a good place to be in. When you're already stressed out and you're doing exercise, it's an extra stress and it's too much. And I have been testing my blood glucose and ketones again while I've been here, just out of curiosity, to see if there's been much change. And it's more consistent here. I'm in those therapeutic zones, which give me that energy and clarity and that sense of well-being. My brain's definitely a lot calmer and I'm able to breathe properly. I did a park run earlier this morning, and it felt pretty easy. Whereas the last one I did in London, which was a few weeks ago now, it was quite, I found it quite difficult to breathe. And I wasn't breathing as much through my nose as I like to. And I was slower, even though it felt harder. And this was quite a quick run, the one I just did this morning. And it didn't feel as difficult. And the undulations were similar. So it's not like it was a hilly course or anything. Or more hilly than the previous one. So yeah, really interesting. And I just have a lot more energy here. I'm calmer, there's less people. I'm not exposed to all of these VOCs, the volatile organic compounds, and the mold and dust and things that you get on London transport. And I'm by the sea, I'm by the river that runs along just down the road from where I am, opposite. I'm in a very wooded area where I can hear the birds, and I wake up to bird sound and it's lovely. Right, it's much better than waking up near traffic on a busy road. So noise pollution is also an issue that you can get if you're living in a more urban environment. Unwanted noise, fumes, yeah, all of these petrochemicals and roadworks constantly. What I find interesting is that when I look at people who are doing these roadworks, they're not even wearing PPE, so they don't have anything to protect them from these fumes that arise from the materials they're working with. It's really quite disturbing. And there are links with, there are associations with these chemicals, these vapors that arise from those materials, when they're laying a road, that kind of thing. Sometimes you even see it. I've seen it from a distance, and saw it when I was in Oxford outside a hospital, and I thought, this is the worst place to be doing roadworks. And there was just this kind of smog that developed from laying the new road. And I was just thinking, yeah, what consequences can this have? So with brain tumors, that's major it's a major cause of these more aggressive types of brain tumor. So something to think about. And what else can I say? What are my updates? Just I said just the importance of having good sleep and a good routine, and I don't have to have that uphill battle constantly where I'm applying all these biohacks to be healthy. It's funny how, well, just living in a natural environment and not having to think about it, you don't have to agonize over trying to fix something that's broken. You know what I mean? Your environment is massive. It affects how you metabolize the food that you eat. It affects your mood. It affects even how hungry you get. It's more normalized when you're in a natural environment in nature, and also away from artificial light. One thing that people do often, which I know is a really bad thing, is actually they will often eat dinner in the evening in front of a TV or a screen. And that's not, if your food is less likely to satisfy you because it's disrupting those hunger and satiety hormones when you've got that intense blue light right in your face. Even if you're wearing blue light blockers, just that hyperstimulation from the screen, and also that distraction element, and also you still have the flickering and the light, and it just plays games with your brain and your hormones. If you think about it, the eyes are part of the brain. People don't like to think about it, they think of it separate. And it's the only part of the brain that we can see. We can see it with our eyes, and it is our eyes. So light entering the retina has so many effects. We have clock genes in all of our cells, and obviously if you have some issue with your brain, the brain's probably most affected by that. And all of these organs have this kind of crosstalk with the brain. It's a bidirectional relationship. I often say just with the gut, with the gut, but it's also all these other hormones, because you have all these signals going back and forth. And so you have to think about it in both directions. And the eyes are one portal where that can be directed, kind of like directing trains. You have the central station in the brain, and then your optogenetically, I think, would be an accurate kind of description, maybe. You're then influencing all those signals to different organs. And so it's easier to do in the summer. This time of year, I'm finding it so much easier. I don't have to apply all these biohacks. Often the people who are really into biohacking are just doing all of this stuff when the simple thing to do is just to move location. Obviously, the best place to move would be along the equator, but that's not always practical. So the second best thing for me was to move here, and it's something I've wanted to do for a while, but I hadn't had the opportunity. And when I did have the opportunity recently, I just decided to grab it with both hands because that wouldn't have been an option for me if I waited too long. And just having my own space and not having to stress about renting somewhere. And I feel very privileged to be in that situation because it's not always like that. And the situation I was in before I moved wasn't nice. So it's like night and day, and I've had to adjust. And you meet new people. People are very friendly where I am now, which is nice. Because I was impacted by other people's negative energy when I was in London. It was too much. Because I do think you can feel people's energy. And it was really weighing me down. And here it's a more calm, relaxed, open environment. I've met so many nice people, even in just the couple of weeks I've been here. I've been doing a lot of meditation, which is great, in groups. That's been really helpful because it gives you a sense of perspective. It humbles you. It makes you realize, if you needed a reminding, that we're all the same. We're all a collective. Not a collective like the Borg, but we're all independently collective. We can feed off each other's energy. We all want to be happy. Even though we may think that we want something material, what we really want is just to be happy and have human connection and to have love. And so, yeah, sometimes we think we want other things, but I know, say, if you're in poverty, if you're really struggling just to get by, it's not that you want to be super rich. I mean, you probably would, but happiness would be just to be able just to have enough to get by and to not have to stress about bills and rent payments and that kind of thing. Because that's where I am. I just want to be stable and happy and not have to move every few years, because throughout my whole life I've always moved places. It's nice to have a place that's permanent and stable. Stability in life is important. And I've met some people here with brain cancer. It's pretty hard to avoid at the moment because cases have been rising quite dramatically in recent years. I have a few reasons why that could be. But it's always nice to meet people in person who you can give hope to, and I found that here, which is it's really nice. It's a nice place to be where you don't have to, if you're giving, I don't like to say giving advice, but sharing my experiences with other people and providing information and suggestions. It's nice that you don't have to worry about that person's environment. Because as I say, it can affect your behaviors, your perspective on life, and that can impact on your adherence to a therapeutic ketogenic diet and ketogenic metabolic therapies. Especially if that person has a family that puts pressure on them. If they've got children, it can be difficult. I've seen examples where someone has just had a baby and then it's affecting their circadian rhythms because they're just awake and asleep at funny times. And then the tumor grows. And this is the husband, because with females, when they're having a baby, the tumors can grow because of hormone changes. And also your blood sugar changes with those changes in those female hormones and just how the baby's growing. Tumors grow too, especially in the brain. But yeah, I'm not planning on having kids anytime soon. I might get a dog at some point. That would be nice. But I don't think I could handle the responsibility of having kids. Maybe in future, we'll see. But it seems unlikely. Even though I'm at the age where you think about these things quite a lot. But yeah, being mindful helps a lot more with your adherence to any kind of diet. That's been the major thing for me. People often ask me, "Oh, how do you stick to such a strict diet all the time?" The reason is that it's because I don't think about it all the time. If you're constantly ruminating over what you're going to eat and when and how and why, rather than having a plan and then not thinking about it and preparing everything in advance, or what I like to do is I only have the food that I need to have in my kitchen, and everything is very set out. I know what my meals are going to be. And even if I wanted to, I couldn't eat more than that because I don't have it. I only get what I need for those days. Or I'll just put a bunch of stuff in the freezer and then I couldn't eat it because you'd have to wait until it's thawed out. So I have what I need. And then I just go to a butcher or a farmer's market to get what I need when I need it. And that's it. Sometimes I go to supermarkets, but I try and go more to farmers markets and butchers because it's easier. One challenge that I do have at the moment is just trying to eat enough food because I'm super active, and also it's just hard to eat enough to keep my weight up. I say weight. I want to have lean tissue. I don't want to get fat. It helps me to get a bit more fat. But mainly that's actually because, well, for me, it's not just that I feel better, but also I think I look better with a bit more fat. It's a funny thing to say, but I feel like I do. So yeah, uh, got lots to look forward to in the coming weeks in terms of those tests, and I've got a meeting with my oncologist back in London, so that will be interesting because we're working out a plan what to do with the results of these blood tests. It's uncharted territory. We don't know. The aim is to get rid of that low signal that we can see in the blood. I would be the first person to ever do that because it's a new test and it's an idea that I came up with where You know how you often get these N of ones, these case studies, these anecdotes of people who have achieved complete remission from their cancer, where you can't see it on scans, but it's likely that because it's an incurable disease, it'll come back at some point. But with this test, I'm in complete remission. It's been many years, but the test has picked up a small signal, which you would otherwise only really see, say, if a person has died with cancer. You would only really see that with an autopsy after they've died, even if they die of natural causes. And so the intriguing question is if you can completely get rid of those circulating tumor cells and the origins. So something's clearly breaking off from there, from the tumor site where it was, and circulating. It's gone across the blood-brain barrier, and it's circulating in the bloodstream. Incidentally, you can also diagnose certain types of brain tumors in the urine, which that's a new thing as well. Wonder if you can detect it in sweat as well, but I don't know. It's this kind of shedding thing, maybe, but it's interesting. And I don't know quite, I don't know quite what this test actually means, but I don't think any of us really do, because it's not indicated for someone like me. But I want to explore and I want to ask different questions. I caused a bit of a ruckus yesterday in in a cancer group, just talking about glutamine and the context of that, because my view is that I don't think it's always a bad thing, and I think the context is missed. Yes, it's a major fuel. Um, it's a major fuel with advanced cancer, but there's this double-edged sword kind of thing where it can also. The question I have is that happening because you have necrotic tissue and invasion into healthy tissue and this and you have perhaps a leaky brain and a leaky gut, and then it's actually like with cancer, it's actually like a protection mechanism whereby it's scavenging glutamine to grow and proliferate when there is this impermeability. And so my question is, if you actually fix that, which in certain scenarios, say for a less aggressive cancer that's not taking up glutamine more and is a more dependent on, it's more glycolytic, it's more dependent on glucose, then in that situation, if you actually supplement with glutamine and fix that leaky gut, fix those tight junctions where there's that letting things in and out, and having that effect on the brain with the leaky brain, where you're having it's potentially repairing that, and you have an abundance of the the beneficial bacteria in the gut that we see can be anti-neuroinflammatory, and then you're having less of the inflammatory bacteria, which we've seen this in recent papers. It's fascinating stuff, actually. If you have that, then surely it has some impact on what the tumor is taking up, because when you have advanced cancer and you have for example, cancer cachexia, what we see is that glutamine is taken up in abundance by in through the blood and skeletal muscle. That's what's happening. That's why you get this kind of wasting away. And so, yeah, the question is, if you act early enough and you fix that gut dysbiosis and that intestinal impermeability, what effect will that have in the future? Can you prevent that more aggressive phenotype? That's my question. And for some reason, even though I said this is my hypothesis, it's not fact necessarily, I got a load of just pushback saying, no, what are you talking about? It's a major fuel and that's that. you know, I always try to think about the bigger picture and think, okay, why is this happening? You get some brain tumors, for example, that with amino acids, if we're just talking about the amino acids, because glucose is always going to be the predominant fuel. And then you have different degrees of uptake of these other fuels whereby with aggressive disease it can be these amino acids, fatty acids, nucleic acids. Some people say ketones as well, but these are really poor studies. They're not well done. And so I wouldn't take much notice of those. And then they try to say if these ketolytic enzymes are expressed in tumors, then it's more likely. But my thought on that is just look at the study. Usually what it is the glucose is high as well as the ketones. And they often use pro-inflammatory fats. So there's that too. And we don't see it in any other indication. So I think those are junk studies. And it always comes up. People always mention it. They say, what about this? And they say, what about the reverse Warburg effect? And it can get frustrating because I get this at cancer conferences as well. It's like, oh, really? I have to say the same thing again. It's often the same people who say the same thing too. I've got one of those conferences coming up in July in Cambridge, and they're paying for me to go, which is always a win. But I often feel I often feel a bit alone. It's when I go to these, it's me and a few people at Imperial who are in our kind of like keto crowd, let's say, who have done research on this and who understand it. It's the people who make the most negative comments or the most critical comments are people who don't really know much about this. Yeah, DIPG, just reading that comment. Very tricky to treat because it's inoperable and it's in a very central location. And yeah, it's diffuse, so has this kind of can have a more cloudy appearance, which is not a good thing. And it's infiltrative. It's diffuse infiltrative pontine glioma. And you get this in children. It's an inoperable type of brain tumor. I have reported on an interesting study where there was a complete remission of this tumor, which was very interesting to read because it's an unusual scenario. These tumors are uniformly fatal, and there's not much you can do. They don't even often they don't even like to treat it with standard treatments because they recognize, well, it's not going to do anything. 22 years old, so it probably in there for a number of years. That's really, it's incredibly sad to hear about. It's sad to hear about any brain tumor, but whenever I hear someone has DIPG, my heart sinks because I know that how it devastates families, and it's just not nice. My ex had, you won't mind me mentioning this, I'm sure, had an inoperable brainstem glioma. And she's doing well now, but she's done some alternative stuff, let's say. In this case, it was a few metabolic compounds she was taking that has helped. She actually tried a therapeutic ketogenic diet, but it was at a stage where she was under a huge amount of stress, and she lost too much weight, and it was too much. So we just said, let's try these few things, and she relaxed her diet, and things went well. So yeah, peptides, no. Look into that though. I'm always open-minded, looking at different things. And for me, the question is, well, if my result with the blood test shows that it's similar to the original tumor, do I just do what I did before but push harder with it? Or do I try something new? Or do I go on a long fast? You can go to these fasting retreats now. There's a nice one in Spain that I already planned that that I would go to if I had a recurrence or needed to do therapeutic fasting for a long period. Because I'd want to be monitored. I've done these long fasts on my own, and it's not as much fun. I want to be social with other people when I'm fasting, and I want to make an experience of it. When you make an experience of these things, and when you try to make it fun, when you're doing it with others, it's quite powerful. I've been part of a few fasting groups with other people, and it's not that it gets competitive or anything, but you share experiences and it helps a lot. Because doing things on your own is harder, I think, unless you're like a monk, I guess. Cavernoma, yes, I'm very aware of that because what I had, which is highly unusual, is I had a cavernous hemangioma encased around my brain tumor. It is something that can happen. And the theory is that I actually had a cavernous hemangioma that was just sitting there not doing anything. It can kind of bubble up, and it's kind of like a volcano. It can explode and make you have seizures. But it hadn't for many years. And there's literature to show that these cavernous hemangiomas, over time and under a lot of stress, this is the theory that's been posited about my brain tumor, is that initially it was a cavernous hemangioma, which is not a brain tumor, and underwent malignant transformation into this very aggressive type of brain cancer. There's only a handful of cases in the literature where this has been shown, but I've seen more and more of these cases, which is quite disturbing. And you think, why is that happening? So yeah, not too alarming, but I do think you could. I definitely think diet would respond massively to a cavernous hemangioma, a ketogenic metabolic therapy, because it's anti-angiogenic. And a cavernous hemangioma or a cavernoma or a cavernous angioma, as they call them in the US for some reason, it's like a ball of fire, and you can put out that fire by starving it. Because it like a tumor, it's not a tumor, but like a tumor, it's it's having that effect where it's making you have those seizures when you're having this increase in insulin that's bringing your blood sugar up, and then yeah, it's kind of erupts. So you want to minimize that firstly, and then secondly, you want to try and starve it and make it go away. Which I haven't seen a case of that, but in terms of the mechanisms and the theory, it makes perfect sense that you could do that. And I'd be fascinated to see how you get on with that if you try maybe going on a long fast or taking some natural compounds that are anti-angiogenic. I think, I don't know, green tea extracts might help. Not green tea itself, but EGCG. Often with cancer, people take that because it can block that glutamine pathway, but it can also be anti-angiogenic. So might be useful. It can have, yeah, it could be useful. I was going to say it possibly can have some negative effect on the liver if you're taking a lot of it, but I think I may be mistaken for something else, but it's always a consideration. I have blood tests quite often, but they're kind of boring now, so I don't necessarily have them as often as I used to. The only thing is, I'm in that category of a lean mass hyperresponder, where my total cholesterol is pretty high, but my triglycerides are like next to nothing. And just in general inflammatory markers are very low, and all my other markers just look great, and I've got a high HDL. But yeah, I'd always have this high cholesterol, and interestingly, and I'm quite lean, and if I get leaner, my cholesterol goes up even more, and if I gain body fat, my cholesterol goes down. So yeah, interesting. So I don't know what that means, but I know people are doing research on that. And I seem to be in that group of people who have this occurrence, this thing that we can see. The long fasting is interesting because for me, I need to take electrolytes when I do it. And I used to make my own, but Richard Smith, Keto Pro, look him up. He has a very good unflavored electrolyte. I want to say powder, but salts that I take. I've been taking, and it's very good. So I don't have to make up my own. Because I was making up my own with sodium chloride and magnesium sulfate and sodium bicarb and potassium chloride, and it's a bit of a pain. It was good, and I'd only use them when I was doing these long fasts, primarily for the purpose of not having a breakthrough seizure. because I can have breakthrough seizures. They're called breakthrough seizures because if you don't normally have seizures, which I don't now unless I encounter triggers. So I have non-epileptic seizures. I don't have epilepsy is usually described by having more than one seizure and having it be spontaneous. So I don't technically have epilepsy anymore, which in itself is amazing, considering my history of pretty horrible seizures that were spontaneous. So it's that spontaneity. If it's not spontaneous, and if you have all these triggers, then you don't really have epilepsy, but you can have seizures, non-epileptic seizures. Sometimes they call them psychogenic, but it's a horrible term because it makes it sound like it's all in your head. Stress and things like that can trigger seizures, but yeah, it's a horrible term because people think it's psychosomatic, which it definitely is not. And I have this thing called functional neurological disorder, which is a very similar kind of thing. It's not necessarily that well, it's partly the way these non-epileptic seizures present themselves. Funny spasms, usually facial spasms for me. Funny sensations. Not funny, haha, unfortunately. It would be hilarious if I was like the Joker and I was just going into fits of laughter. I do that sometimes, but mainly just to deal with the awkwardness. I laugh when it's inappropriate to laugh. Also helps me to deal with life. Yeah, you have to be careful with fasting if you're prone to these kinds of things, especially if you, um, yeah, if you get stressed easily, or if you, which I don't, I try not to, or if you, yeah, or if you, even if you sweat a lot, because you have to consider that. Sometimes I find that if I go on a fast and I feel like I'm hungry, it's not really physiological hunger. I actually need some salt. And then I have the salt and then the hunger goes away. I feel satiated even though it's just salt. And when I take it, I prefer to have it not mixed in water because I actually like to I like to have it in my mouth and to kind of chew on it or have it just stay in my mouth for a while. Because I find often with wanting food, it's that mouth feel as well. And so I get that with I like the big salt flakes. I get that with that, but if I'm drinking something, it's not the same. I just like it, and I like the taste of salt. It's kind of it's become my sugar. I don't crave it, but it's very satisfying to me. And I try different salts, but I like the modern salt best. I find it it's very satisfying, especially after doing a lot of exercise. But yeah, I find it very interesting. I say that a lot, interesting, but it is interesting with my running in particular, because when you're running in therapeutic ketosis, it's kind of like you're running on air and you're gliding. And that must affect breathing as well, because it's such an efficient fuel source. And after you've been running for a period of time, then you have that switch. That obviously you're using all energy systems at any time, but just you're predominantly entering into the that phase where you're using more fat. And for me, that if I'm running at a lower intensity, it's more like walking because I'm pretty fit, and so it's not. I can easily have a conversation with someone, and I can breathe through my nose if I want to. It's not, yeah, it's not too much of a stress. So yeah, stress and overthinking is a massive thing. Just mentioned in the comments, in the chat. I was thinking of doing like I mentioned this before, but like a weekly thing, I don't know, not necessarily a Q&A, but like an update, especially as I'm going to be more busy with research and these things. Because I think people would like that, and I have some interesting insights in between my ramblings, or in my ramblings, sometimes. But yeah, I have nothing else to say, so I'm gonna go back in the sunshine and enjoy it, and enjoy the rest of your day, whatever time it is, wherever you are.